Security in Drupal, what can go wrong? Or different emphasis, what could possibly go wrong? Before we get started, I did remember to push the big red button. That's one slide that is not on the online version. If you go to the session page on DrupalCampNewJersey.org, there's a link to an online version of the slides that is, except for that, identical to what I'm paging through here. So the introduction, about me, I'm Benji Fisher. I use the same username on Drupal.org, GitHub, and GitLab. I'm a longtime member of the usability group since 2020. I've been one of the co-maintainers of the migration system, the Migrate API, and since a couple years after that, I've been a member of the security team. We also have 3 other members of the security team here who've been around much longer than I have, and so combined security knowledge is way more than I have. So thank you 3 for coming.
Wouldn't count that.
Yeah, combined, yes. The whole is greater than the part.
Okay, sure.
You can follow along either by going to the session page or using the QR code or slides.benjifisher.info. So I'll start off with the introduction, which is where we are now. I'll talk about what is the OWASP Top 10. And they just changed what the acronym stands for. I'll have to see if I can remember that. I'll talk about what is Drupal. Is there anyone in the room who's new to Drupal? No. So everyone is familiar with it, but we'll try to look at it with an outsider's eyes. And then, don't be afraid of the long list. I will go through 2 of the top 10 security vulnerabilities on the OWASP Top 10 list. They're listed here. The first 5 are broken access control, security misconfiguration, software supply chain failures, cryptographic failures, and injection. Those are the first 5, and I think I'm prepared to talk about any of those. The 2025, every 4 years it seems, the OWASP refreshes its list, and just in November last year they came up with the current version, and this is the first talk I've given based on that version. And for my talk it's much simpler because I think those are the 5 that I'm prepared to talk about. 6 through 10 I haven't prepared. Maybe next time I give the talk I'll have one of those. But for the record, they are insecure design, authentication failures, software or data integrity failure, security logging and alerting failures. I'm not sure what I could say about that. Like there aren't any security advisories for Drupal that say you should pay more attention to your logs, but of course you should. Mishandling of exceptional conditions, I might be able to talk about that one, and a conclusion. And these slides borrow from some of Peter Wollinen's Cracking Drupal presentations, and they borrow from OWASP.org, which has a Creative Commons license, and so do all of my presentations. And if you're following along on a copy of this, you can click on the link at the bottom. It's Creative Commons license. So what is the OWASP Top 10? Oh, I cleverly put it in the title so I don't have to remember. It used to be Open Web Application, but now it's Open Worldwide Application Security Project, OWASP. And I guess desktop applications can use the same technologies as web applications. Peter looks very skeptical about that change in the name. It's still OWASP. So
is that specific to open source, or is that?
The question is that specific to open source? I think not. I think, the list of top 10 vulnerabilities doesn't matter whether the world can see that you've made a mistake or whether you keep it in-house.
I think it's more that the framework of assessing vulnerabilities is open.
Are the contributors from both sides of the fence? Any idea? I'm sorry, it's off topic. I'm just super curious now. I didn't know about it.
So the question is whether contributors come from both sides of the fence, open source and closed source. And Peter mentioned that the vulnerability framework, which OWASP is responsible for, that is open. And please do interrupt with questions. I've got a slide at the end, say any questions, but I'd much rather hear your questions while I have the appropriate slide up to talk about it, while everyone's still thinking about it. And I prefer that way. And it's one way of telling me that you're engaged. So the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, or OWASP, is a nonprofit foundation that works to improve the security of software. It's not Drupal specific, so as I said, we're trying to look at it with outsiders' eyes or get off the island. The OWASP Top 10 is a standard awareness document for developers and web application security. It represents a broad consensus about the most critical security risks to web applications. It's updated every few years. As I said a minute ago, the most recent version is quite recent. And when they come up with the list, part of it is data-driven. What gets reported, they analyze CVEs and so forth. And part of it is survey-driven, which is good because that way they can try to capture emerging problems that don't yet have good test coverage. What is Drupal? Again, let's try to forget that we've been working with it for a long time and pretend we're describing Drupal to someone who's not familiar with it. It's a content management system, a web-based content management system, or CMS. And basically what that means is Drupal says to the world, enter data in my forms, I will save it to the database, and then generate web pages. And when Drupal says that, the hackers say, sounds great, let's get started. And the standard example, exploits of the hacker sees a name field, and instead of putting in John Doe or Bob Smith or whatever, puts in Robert, quote, right paren semicolon, drop table students, semicolon, dash, dash. And why does the hacker do that? Well, the hacker imagines that you've probably got some processing for this name field that looks like variable SQL gets, quote, insert into students, paren name, close paren, values, and then interpolates whatever value you've put into that text box. And if the hacker has guessed right and enters that in the text box, what he gets is that the SQL statement is insert into students name, values of Robert, which looks kind of normal, and then a semicolon, which is the end of statement symbol for SQL or many other languages, and then drop table students, semicolon, and then what does the dash dash do in SQL?
Comment.
It's a comment. From there to the end of the line is a comment, so it doesn't matter what comes after that in your processing, it gets commented out. So this is referred to as SQL injection. It's bad, you shouldn't let it happen. And if this example looks familiar, it's because I cribbed it from XKCD, which also is very generous and lets people use its work with Creative Commons license.
Can I interrupt there and say, you should try to run that SQL statement against Drupal using Drupal's database API and see what happens. Because the database API should throw an exception and say that you're not allowed to have a semicolon or a statement separator in your statements. So if you ran that kind of SQL.
So Peter suggests that we do an experiment and try to hack our Drupal site this way, using the Drupal API.
But you know, as the audience, as a take-home example.
And if you use Drupal's database API correctly, yes, it will.
Not even correctly. I think even if you use it at all.
If you use it at all. Okay, so it's not, you don't have to go through the PDO and all that, but even if you used DB query directly, it'll save you from this?
I
For
think
multiple
so.
statements, but there
For
might be other things than a semicolon you could put after the.
Yeah, it should save you from being able to, well, on MySQL, the MySQL database layer, or MySQL PDO driver prohibits multiple statements. And at the PHP level, it's looking for multiple statements for all database drivers and rejecting them.
Okay, so
In MySQL, you have 2 layers of defense, and other database engines, you have 1 layer of defense.
so I have to repeat whatever you say for the sake of the recording.
But
So Peter says that first of all, PHP protects you from executing more than one SQL statement at a time. And if you're using MySQL or MariaDB, I assume, there's a second layer of protection because it also refuses to
right, so
accept multiple
Drupal's
statements.
PHP code will look for the semicolon, and also we told the PDO driver for MySQL to only execute 1 statement at a time.
Okay,
Someone
so
can hit me after lunch for the backstory on that.
so yes. I mean, I guess my point is that from a security point of view, a web-based CMS is one of the worst ideas ever. And Peter has been on the security team, as I mentioned, much longer than I have, and has been trying to sort of make it a less terrible idea by putting in as many layers of protection as he can think of. So besides being a terrible idea, a web CMS, Drupal is an active international open source project. And the Drupal community is one of the largest open source communities in the world. More than 1 million passionate developers, designers, trainers, strategists, coordinators, editors, and sponsors working together. Cribbed that from the About page on Drupal.org. And we take security seriously. We try to do the best of this fundamentally flawed premise. The security team is an all-volunteer group of individuals who work to improve the security of the Drupal project. Members of the team come from countries across 4 continents. And the team was founded in 2005, so more than 20 years ago, with a mailing list, and has had 4 team leads in that period. And he's not in the room now, but the current team lead is wandering somewhere around the building, Michael Hess. And at this point, we get to the choose your own adventure part of the talk. As you can see, the titles across the top. And sort of one of the advantages of the 2025 reorganization is that I can now say that I've prepared 1 through 5 because things got moved around and I got lucky. So I usually have time in one of these presentations to talk about 2 of these. Where should we go first? Oh, and there's a little bit of new stuff under cryptographic failures.
Yeah, it's supply chain and maybe cryptographic failures or injection.
You don't get to pick both of them. Come on, let other people have a chance.
This is my suggestion. I'm not picking.
Okay. What's that?
Have a handbook.
So come on, shout out some suggestions. What do you want to hear about?
Broken access control.
And also, there are a couple of people here who've been to my talks before, so you don't want to repeat the same thing you've seen before.
Which one did you say has the new stuff?
Cryptographic failures.
Okay, I vote for that.
Okay, and someone said broken access control. I see some thumbs up. Okay, let me start with the cryptographic failures. So, cribbing the what can goes wrong from the OWASP website, data is transmitted in clear text, so that would be sort of information disclosure. Old or weak cryptographic algorithms or protocols are used, and that's where I have something new to say. Encryption is not enforced, or you're using deprecated hash functions such as MD5 or SHA-1, and hash functions are also related. And I'm going to duplicate this tab in my browser because I'll want to refer to it later. And this one, this is the online version. I'm just going to close that tab so that I don't get confused. So my advice is to keep things simple. Unless you are really, really into cryptography, don't try to do it yourself. Know when to call for an expert's help. And one question, what sort of data needs protection? What needs to be encrypted?
Personally identifiable information.
Personally identifiable information, yeah, social security numbers, credit card numbers, even email addresses. Anything else?
Passwords.
Passwords, that's a big one. And I'll talk about passwords in some detail later. Anyone use Google Maps on their websites, or what are there, or MailChimp? What do you need to integrate MailChimp or Drupal Maps with your website? An API key, which is basically the same idea as a password. Yeah, it's kind of long, but let's see. What did I write down? Passwords, API keys, personally identifiable information, and business secrets. Like maybe business secrets don't need to be on your publicly available website at all. Maybe you have a separate internally facing website for that. But I don't know what. The thing is still red. We are still recording, but you guys don't see it. Who knows?
You just touch like the keyboard very briefly and just like.
Maybe just touching the keyboard can do that. Okay. And yeah, personally identifiable information includes social security numbers, credit cards, health information. HTTP and HTTPS. There are some points here that I've been surprised at running into people who don't know some of these. So a second piece of advice is do not manage your own servers unless you are in the business of providing servers. When I got started in Drupal, I spun up a little virtual machine on Linode, and I had a lot of fun installing Apache and yada, yada, yada. And I used that for personal projects, and I learned a lot from that. It was great. But I wasn't running any websites that mattered on that setup, and it would be a bad idea if I did. So HTTPS, the S is for secure, provides encryption and authentication. So everybody understands encryption. You know, between you encrypt it in your browser, and then the request gets sent off to the web server, where they decrypt it, and then they do the same thing with response going back, so that no one else can see it in transit, because who knows where it's going? The Internet Protocol could be sending it all the way around the world, Russia, China. But a lot of people don't seem to realize that HTTPS also provides authentication, that you are talking to the person you think you're talking to. So when you connect to your bank or something, and you ask them to transfer money, and you give them their account numbers and all that, it's really the bank. It's not an imposter who's talking to you. And that's why encryption certificates used to cost money. These days they don't. But, well, they cost money. It's just that you don't have to pay for it, thanks to Let's Encrypt. You should enforce HTTPS. There's this header called Strict Transport Security Header, or HSTS. And there are a lot of places where you can control that header. You probably don't need to do it at the Drupal level. Probably if you're using a CDN, you can add the header there. If not there, then at the server level, or if you do need to do it from within Drupal, you can use the security kit module. And people often talk about SSL just because habits are hard to break, but The SSL protocol is insecure. We've been using, which is secure socket layers. What's a socket? Don't answer. Transport layer security, TLS is the modern one, and I think as far as I know, 1.2 is secure and 1.3 is the current version. I can probably generate a new SSL Labs report for Drupal.org. It'll take a few minutes. The slide has an old picture, and if it comes up A+ again, you can thank Neil for that.
No, we don't do that, it's Fastly.
Fastly does that? Okay.
Yeah, we don't deal with, I use it with some certs, but that one's Fastly.
Okay, Drupal update information. Oh, this is sort of an old thing. For a long time, the update module, not to be confused with the automatic updates module, but the update module was querying http://updates.drupal.org/release history. We did finally fix that in 2020. And it took another 3 years to fix it, or 2.5 years to fix it in Drupal 7. But that's sort of old news. I should probably get rid of that slide. API keys. This is another sort of information. You use them for external services, SMTP, translation. They're basically like long passwords. Do not commit them to your repository. Do not paste them into Jira messages, because Jira messages generate emails that are sent unencrypted. Right. If you do accidentally commit an API key to your repository, you should probably revoke it and generate a new one. If that's not an option, you should look into the big friendly giant. If you do a Google search for BFG Git, you'll find a tool you can use that actually removes stuff from your Git index. Like just not having it available on a branch isn't good enough. There's a guide we added in Security in Drupal guide called Securing Authentication Credentials, which can help. You can use environment variables. You can use settings.php and get a value from an external file, something that's not tracked in Git. And there are some contributed modules for key management that can help. Passwords in Drupal. So user management is one of Drupal's strengths. It's one of the great reasons for using Drupal. You wouldn't want to roll your own. You wouldn't want to manage passwords. Your first attempt at doing so would sort of work, but wouldn't be secure. Drupal has been iterating for years on this and does it well. One of the first rules of many is that you don't store passwords in the database, nor in the file system. So if someone enters my password, and you look in the password table, you do not see my password. You see some hash of that password, some complicated function based on whatever is input. The second rule is that defense in depth, you assume that people will get access to your database. If you have developers doing Drupal SQL sync or just downloading a dump of your database, then they pass it around, you have no control over it. Just assume that it's going to be compromised. So there's a salt that gets added, so just a string that gets concatenated to the password before it goes into this hashing function. And there are reasons you want to intentionally use an expensive hash function, something that takes time and memory, because however much time and memory you're using, some factor of that, 100,000 million times as much, is what an attacker would have to use to compromise your system. So if you use a super efficient hash function, you're making it easier for the attacker as well. And just as an example, I installed the Umami demo profile because it gives me sets up a few users for me. The anonymous user, UID 0, does not have a password. UID 1 admin has $argon2ID, and I will explain how I got that later. And some other stuff, and then this long, not quite random, but certainly you don't see any patterns in their hash. And then users 2 and 3 start off $2Y$, which I'll talk about, and not quite as long, but those are the hashed passwords that actually get saved in the password in the database. And then the way it works is when you log in, Drupal keeps your password in memory. It's not going to save it to the database, but it keeps it in memory, computes the hash, compares that to what's in the table. If the two match, then it says, yes, you gave the right password, you can log in. If they don't match, it says, try again. So knowing the password, someone could log in as you. Knowing this hash, assuming the database gets compromised and they have the hash, that's not enough for them to log in as you. So a little bit of history. Until Drupal 10.1, we were using a custom password hashing algorithm. I think it was the same as the one used in Drupal 7. From 10.1 to now, 11.3, we said we should not be in the business of coming up with a password hashing algorithm. We are web developers. We're not cryptography experts.
Well, we didn't come up with the other algorithm either.
We didn't come up with the other algorithm, but we implemented it separately. Thank you, Peter. So we started using the standard PHP functions, password hash, and the default PHP password, which is this rather old algorithm called bcrypt. And now, SSL Labs is unavailable. But I wanted to refer to this slide. One of the things it says is don't use deprecated hash functions. Well, we weren't using MD5 or SHA-1, but we were using the default PHP hashing algorithm, which is bcrypt, which is very old and has some problems. In Drupal 11.4, maybe, you'll be able to use your choice of hashing function. And that's where this Argon2 comes from, Argon2ID.
Your choice meaning per user or for the site?
Question is your choice meaning per user or the site? The answer is per site. So you, the site owner, get to choose. And in Drupal 12.0, I'm pretty sure the issue is already RTBC. I think it'll be committed soon. It will be configurable, and it will default to Argon2, which is more secure than bcrypt. So the password default constant in PHP hasn't changed in a long, long time. It's been bcrypt, and there are better options available. So I didn't put a link to the issue in here, did I? Oh, maybe I did, yes. Yeah, so here are the references for everything I said on the previous slide. The change record for 10.1, some questions and answers in the password compatibility module, which sort of bridges the gap from the old custom implementation to the standard PHP. Here's the RTBC issue, switch to Argon2 as the default password hashing algorithm. The change record associated to that issue, it's currently drafted. It'll be published as soon as the issue is fixed. If you manage a site that uses passwords, not single sign-on, but it uses passwords, and for whatever reasons, government regulations, whatever, it matters to you that you follow the NIST guidelines and don't want to use bcrypt 2, there is a contrib module which will give you this functionality right away. You don't have to wait till you upgrade to 11.4. Right, 11.4 hasn't been released yet, another few months, or Drupal 12. So there is a contrib module, PHP password, you can use. And I think that's the end of what I have to say about password hashing. And that's the new stuff. There's this RTBC issue that I expect will go in pretty soon.
What is RTBC, ready to be contributed?
Question is, what is RTBC? Is it ready to be contributed? And it used to be, and this is another case where they kept the acronym but changed the meaning. And officially now it means reviewed and tested by the community. And I don't know how often I'm looking at a Drupal issue and someone sets the status to RTBC and I point out, well, you reviewed it, but you didn't test it. And I have to catch myself because I also am almost ready to say it's RTBC, and I have to remind myself, yeah, you really should test it and make sure it works.
Sleeping in laptop.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So, Benji, the only thing I would add to that is that usually systems, when someone logs on and their hash is old, it's in the old format, it will upgrade it to the new one and resave it.
Okay, so Chris wants to mention that if you previously logged on, the hash that's stored in the database is old, and it will start with something like 2y for bcrypt, or it was something different for the old Drupal 7. And when you log in again is when the hash will be recomputed and resaved. So I call
If it's an outdated or weak hash, basically.
If it's an outdated or weak hash, it will only be recalculated when you log in, and blah, blah, sorry but for the scrolling, but that's mentioned in this Q&A, which I wrote. Because I figured people would be confused when Drupal 10.1 came out. What's going on? So yes. Any other questions or comments about passwords, about cryptography, and yeah, OWASP, by the way, not only has this top 10, they have a lot of resources. If you do have to deal with passwords and need some quick advice, you can find some so-called cheat sheets on the OWASP website, which is almost as good as asking an expert.
It's also worth mentioning, just for context, that the reason password hashing has to be complicated like this is that people don't necessarily choose good passwords. In contrast, we hash the session IDs when we store them in the database, but we use a very simple hash because it's already a long random string. So there's no chance that you're going to guess a long random string, even though the hash function to check it is simple.
Okay, so Peter says there's a distinction between passwords and session IDs. We have to hash both of them so that knowing the hash, which is stored in the database, if the database gets compromised, that is not good enough to get you to log in or to hijack the session. But the difference between the two is that computer scientists hate people, right? People choose passwords, and they do a lousy job of choosing passwords. And session IDs are already long and complicated. So because of that distinction, we have to use complicated, expensive hashing algorithms like Argon 2 for passwords, but we can use a very simple hashing algorithm for session IDs. Thank you. And that's the end of passwords, and I guess broken access control, is that the second one we agreed on?
Or security misconfiguration.
Or security misconfiguration. Okay, quick vote. Raise your hand for broken access control. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ooh, it's pretty popular. 11. Raise your hand for security misconfiguration. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we'll do broken access control. Oh yes, and when the top 10 list was rearranged, 2 topics were combined into this, and I prepared both of them, so this is twice as long. So I will skip over some of the slides in this column. So broken access control has a few types of vulnerability. One of them is information disclosure. People see personally identifiable information or some sort of secret that's supposed to be restricted to admins. If non-admins see it, it's a bad thing. If you can edit content or delete content and you're an unauthorized user, that's broken access control. There are a couple of specific things like cross-site request forgery and server-side request forgery, which I'll talk about later, which are special cases of broken access control. And basically, if you're familiar with the acronym CRUD, create, read, update, delete, all 4 of those have to be restricted. And if any one of them breaks, it's a type of access control failure. And read, a lot of stuff is public, doesn't need access control, but not everything. So even read access should be controlled. Here's a horror story. Early in my Drupal career, I was reviewing some custom code on a site that was being passed. They hired us. It had previously been built by some other agency. And they had a custom module, and it had custom access control for /user/1/edit, the edit page for the admin account. And whoever wrote that custom module left off a not, so that anyone except user 1 had access to edit user 1 account. So how do you protect yourself from very serious and very stupid mistakes like that? How do you protect yourself from horror stories?
Code review?
Code review, yes. If a second person had looked at that, I was probably the second person ever to look at that. They might catch the mistake. What else?
Tests.
You might have tests, yes. You have an automated test that checks access and makes sure you didn't get it backwards. Anything else? Yes?
QA, make sure you're running it on QA first.
Yes, if you have a good QA engineer, they'll catch that. Code review, automated tests, and I didn't think to put in QA, so that maybe I'll add that to the slide for next time. And the last point is avoid custom code. There is so much custom code out there that is not necessary, could be done by contrib modules. A lot of it could be done by configuration. If our customers knew the true cost of custom code, they wouldn't ask for so much of it. A contrib module, let alone Drupal core, has lots and lots of eyes on it. That's the great thing about open source. And you're sort of outsourcing your QA, outsourcing your code review if you use contrib modules or Drupal core. So let me at least say what cross-site request forgery is. So it involves 2 sites. There's mysite.com, which maybe is controlled by the hacker. And the second site is example.com, where maybe you're an administrator. And on mysite.com, there's an image tag, and the source is https:/example.com/node/123/delete. And then you, the admin for example.com, visit that site. What happens? Well, your browser, acting on your behalf, sends a request to that URL, node123delete, and if you happen to be currently logged in, have an active session on example.com, we're going to delete node123. Well, maybe. Why doesn't that work?
The confirmation form?
Right, there's a confirmation form. So, so it won't work because you have to first visit there and then submit a confirmation form, which is going to be a post request rather than a get request, good HTML semantics. And then what incorrect assumptions expose a similar vulnerability? And I think for sake of time, I won't try to get you to contribute them, but just confirmation forms was already mentioned. Expect users to tweak the URLs. They might add/edit. They might add/delete. If there's a node ID, they'll put in some other node ID for that. Expect users to tweak URLs. Sometimes they'll do it for fun, sometimes for fairly innocent purposes, and sometimes for hacking purposes. Big one, don't assume that form requests come from the form that you created. So when you write the code to process a form, remember that anyone can send a post request. It doesn't have to come from the form that you think you're processing.
Though you should mention same-site cookie attributes, blocking that.
Same-site cookie attributes somewhat restrict that. Are they? They're not totally effective, are they?
I mean, they should be if the browser is behaving correctly, but it's not 100%.
They should be if the browser is behaving properly. Okay. So there are other ways of protecting yourself from that. But you should have defense in depth, and the way to do that is to have a special token as a hidden value on your form. Drupal does this for you automatically, and that's CSRF access checking, or CSRF token. And remember, forms are hard. Web CMS is a terrible idea, and these are some of the hoops we have to jump through, and locally our framework handles a lot of them for us. The form API puts in that token for you. I do want to go through this slide because one of the things I promised in the issue, in the session description, is that we'll talk about how the security team communicates when a problem is found. And we have what's called an SA, a security advisory. And it has the information. The project is Drupal core. It could also be a contrib module. This one is from 2021, September 15th. The security risk is this rather cryptic string of properties and values, but AEC is access control, and basic means an anonymous user can do it. And there are two other options for access control. And based on those values, we come up with a risk score, a number, and if it's high enough, we call it critical. The vulnerability was cross-site request forgery, and we issued a CVE for it. And the textual description from that security advisory is the Drupal core media module allows embedding internal and external media and content fields. In certain circumstances, the filter could allow an unprivileged user to inject HTML into a page when it is accessed by a trusted user with permission to embed media. In some cases, this could lead to cross-site scripting. So this was a failure of access control, so that if an unprivileged user could somehow trick the admin user into visiting the page, or untrusted user could put some information on the page that then had a bad effect when the admin user, the full admin, visited the page. That was cross-site scripting. And the fix, you can follow the link for the commit hash to see the actual code that changed. But basically, when you're editing WYSIWYG field with a media embed, it added a token, a CSRF token, to the header of the request that was being sent by JavaScript. And then that token was validated when the form was processed. And then this is the second thing that got piled into this first new category in 2025, server-side request forgery, which is basically like a phishing attack. I'm a little embarrassed by my ASCII art here. Maybe the next time I give this talk, this will be done with Mermaid. But a phishing attack is they trick you to click on a link. In server-side request forgery, you trick the server into fetching a link. So the browser goes to the web server, and the web server makes a request, and people trust the web server. All your base belong to us. Another way of putting it is there's a circle of trust. The web server has direct access to the database, SQL. It has direct access maybe to Solr, a search index, and the caches. Those are things you can't access directly, but if you can trick the server into accessing those, you can do some damage. That's basically what server-side request forgery is. I'm at the end of the session, so there's a second security advisory that I could go through. That was for contrib module, and I actually, slides show the code that was changed to fix that one, which was fairly simple code fixes. But we are at end of time, so I'll just quickly run through my conclusion slides. The summary is the same as it was in the introduction. Some references. All of my slide decks are listed here. As you can see, I'm not a designer. And most recent first, so today's talk is at the top. Links to the OWASP Top 10, the project in general, and then the current list. Links to the security team, Drupal release cycle, list of all the security advisories for Drupal and for contrib modules. So every Wednesday, we'll add, well, potentially every Wednesday we add to this list. Some contrib modules that can help. Thank you to Peter for permission to borrow parts of your presentations. And I didn't get to that one. And there's the copyleft notice, Creative Commons. Any more questions? Thank you. Hope you got something out of this. And I still have 87%, so yeah, my laptop is okay. Goodbye recording.